Welcome everybody to our latest webcast for the Buckinghamshire Uncovered series, and this time is on the subject of loneliness and isolation in Buckinghamshire. I'm delighted to be welcomed today by three guests who you'll all hear from shortly. First up, we have Lucie Smith, who's the Public Health Principal from the Public Health team at Buckinghamshire Council. Welcome, Lucie. And we have Stephen Robinson, who's the Deputy CEO at Bucks Mind. And we have Melissa Humphrey, who's the Hilltop Community Centre Manager at the Wycombe Multicultural organisation. And all three of them will be giving you a slightly different set of information about loneliness and isolation in Buckinghamshire. So we'll then follow into a quick Q&A for our panel, and that will be it for the hour. So if I could welcome Lucie first up, who's going to be talking in terms of scene setting, in terms of the current situation with loneliness and isolation in the county. Welcome, Lucie.
Lovely, thank you. So, as Henry's mentioned, I'm going to be giving an overview of what isolation and loneliness look like in Buckinghamshire, looking at some of our data, why we need to be focusing on this as a health and wellbeing issue, and then finally bring us round to talk about what solutions there might be to support this area. So let's just start by reminding ourselves what we mean by isolation and loneliness. So isolation is that objective state of not having adequate social relationships or connections, both in terms of the quality and the quantity of them. Loneliness, on the other hand, is more of a subjective experience. So this is that classic phrase where you can be in a room full of people and yet you can still feel lonely. So this is where an individual doesn't have the desired level of those social contacts. Now, you can be isolated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're lonely, and vice versa. And sometimes one of those states can lead to the other one as well. They may occur at the same time, and you may move in and out of these states. So, for example, we're just moving into the spring. We've got lighter evenings, so that helps people to, go out of their house in the evening when we've got lighter evenings, for example, than perhaps in the winter. So winter and Christmas period sometimes can be much more of a lonely experience for some people than perhaps other times of the year. So it's really important that we take that person-centered approach to understand what's going on for that individual. And so in the work that I do within public health, we talk about how can we support and facilitate opportunities to come together for those social connected experiences by doing activities that give people a sense of purpose and that they want to engage with. It's really important when we're talking about isolation and loneliness that we remember that anyone can be affected by this. Sometimes it might be thought of perhaps an older person's issue, but actually it affects everyone and anyone, and it really is across the life course. Some individuals and groups are going to be more vulnerable than others, and what we do know is that the drivers of those health inequalities, so low income, living in poor quality environment where perhaps you haven't got some of those community assets to engage with, to bring you together, perhaps you haven't got the financial situation to allow you to engage in activities that have got a cost to them, then they will be the drivers that also impact on people's loneliness and isolation. So it links in across a number of different health and wellbeing topics and areas. This is a picture which is often used just to really demonstrate those key life events across the life course where somebody might be more likely to experience loneliness and isolation. So whether that's in our children and young people through sort of bullying, teenage pressures, whether that's people that might be moving in or out of new areas, moving to new homes, new communities, starting new jobs, becoming a new parent. Actually, for some people, that can be quite an isolating time when perhaps those social networks and contacts that they've previously had aren't there, right the way through to, experiencing poor health, a disability, becoming a carer, through to bereavement, for example, or moving into care or leaving care. So a good reminder to us to think about, who is it that we are working with? Who are our services coming into contact with? And might loneliness or isolation be an issue for them? So when we look at our Bucks data, new data that came out last month shows that 5% of our residents experience sort of chronic loneliness. So this is residents that have reported that they feel lonely often or always. 5%, I'm pleased to say, is lower than the England, which is at 7%, and the South East, which is 6%, but that is still 5% of our residents who experience this chronic loneliness. And then when we look at certain groups, so carers, adult social care users, we know that they are not getting as much contact as they would like. So again, key groups that we need to be more aware of, that there might be more prevalence. There's information there on the slide about the risk factors which might cause somebody to be isolated or lonely. But a really big caveat that just because you might have one of these risk factors doesn't therefore automatically mean that you are lonely or isolated. So again, that person-centered approach to understand and find out what's going on for that individual is really important. And the data on this slide shows that if you live in one of our opportunity Bucks wards, which is one of our more deprived areas, that you're more likely to have one of these risk factors than if you live in a non-opportunity Bucks wards. And I'll pick some of these up through some of the examples as well. This map also shows the Community Needs Index. So this looks at what is happening within local areas and whether or not people appear to be engaged in that broader civic life of their community. And again, this links back to some of those risk factors that we can see in those red, darker orange areas, that people appear to be less engaged, and that is likely to be some of those drivers of health inequalities coming into play, and some of those risk factors which we would be more prevalent in some of those areas as well. But again, that's not to say that if you live in some of our more rural areas where perhaps you don't have some of those community assets easily available to you, that actually you're not at risk of isolation and loneliness. So really important that we look at Buckinghamshire as a whole. The reason that we focus on isolation and loneliness within public health is because of the health and wellbeing impact that it can have. So there's a lot of data out there. This slide just pulls out some of the kind of key risk impacts. So loneliness and isolation has a similar effect on mortality, such as things as obesity and smoking. It's associated with an increased risk of heart disease, with stroke, increases the progression of frailty, for example, linked in with chronic pain, and then obviously the mental health side of things as well. So again, loneliness puts people at greater risk of poorer mental health, including depression. There's a link there to suicide in older age, as well as cognitive decline and dementia. So a really big impact on the physical and mental health and well-being of an individual. And then when we look at the wider impact, really interesting to see that people that might be lonely are more likely to go and see their GP more, turn up at A&E more. For younger people, it's associated with lower educational attainment. That might be something that we don't often think about. Even from an employer and a work perspective, if people are lonely, they're less likely to want to progress in work. We might get poorer work performance as well, perhaps because people are less engaged, less motivated. And like most things, there is a cost associated with loneliness. To the person per year, and also to UK employers as well. So this really, once you start looking at this, is really, big issue that we need to support. As part of my other work, we look at healthy aging, and we've ran a big healthy aging survey last year. And when we ask people about how they participate in society, the 408 people that responded, 47% of those said that they agreed or strongly agreed that within their local communities there were venues for activities and meetings. Just over 50% felt that they were part of their community, which is great, but what about nearly the other 50% who don't feel that they're part of that community? Is it because they choose not to be part of that community? Is it because where they live, it's just a house and they commute out to work, for example? So that's really interesting insight to kind of unpick. And then when we asked our residents about the challenges that they face in participating in those communities and what might help overcome, there was a lot of talk about social isolation and that community engagement, having those inclusive community activities that people felt welcomed to join, having better communication about what is available in their local area. People don't often know what's happening, so therefore assume that there isn't anything happening. There was talk about having more social groups, better advertising, talk about buddy schemes and intergenerational activities we heard quite a lot about as well. Transport challenges also came up, so not actually being able to get to some of the venues, the cost of parking, for example, and there was talk about needing to improve public transport. But interestingly, only 27% of our respondents actually used public transport. So we need to drill down into that to understand that in more detail. Narrow footpaths, poor road conditions were a barrier for people to participate, as well as those costs and affordability of some of the activities that perhaps people would like to engage with. And then the safety of their local area as well. So, what are the solutions then? Unfortunately, there isn't one solution that we can do to support isolation and loneliness and to facilitate social connectedness. If there was, we would be doing it. But like most things, it's a really complex picture and it's made up of a number of different solutions. So this slide shows us that there are kind of four components. We need those connector services, so like social prescribers who are reaching out, having those really person-centered conversations to understand what's happening within an individual's life, to be able to support those individuals to find solutions. Some people might be able to find their own solutions by looking at, local community Facebook pages, finding out what's going on, engaging in some of the activities. Other people might need a bit of hand holding. So those connector services in supporting those people to reach those areas. And we've got our social isolation guidance that helps with some of those person-centered conversations. But this is about having people trained up in making every contact count. It's about having services. So we've got our community women's health workers who will be working very much with new mums, again, helping to have those person-centered conversations and linking them up with activities in their local area. We've then got those direct services that we might often think of. So Movers and Shakers is a really good example of that. Those opportunities that bring people together through a common interest, but gives them that opportunity to socially connect. So there's lots of examples of those sort of direct services that are out there. Next is those gateway infrastructure solutions. So these are the bigger things that are more difficult to solve, like the transport, like having the community venues in local areas. We've seen lots of examples at local levels where perhaps community venues are being used in a different way. So pubs might be having board game evenings that bring people together in sort of a non sort of targeted way. we've got things like that. We've got our Opportunity Bucks program, who's doing a lot of work to improve the quality of public spaces, making them feel safe and a nice place to actually move around, which in itself will facilitate that community connectedness. Looking at road traffic calming schemes, for example, to enable people, just physically to be able to cross that road to go to the supermarket where there's a cafe where they can engage with people. And then we've got the higher system level approaches. So in Buckinghamshire, we're signed up as an age-friendly community. We've got a whole strategy and an action plan looking at all of the areas that I've already spoken about to support and create an environment that naturally enables that social connectedness to take place. So whether that's through our age-friendly work, through the work within our Opportunity Bucks program as well. So hopefully that's given you a whistle-stop tour of what we're talking about, what it looks like in Buckinghamshire, why we need to focus on it, and then some ideas for what solutions might look like. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lucie. That was great. I was particularly struck, I think, by the complexity of the issue, actually, and how varied and holistic it is, how it impacts on people throughout their lifespan, and the impacts are many and varied. I was also interested to hear about the sort of the link to deprivation, and actually that's another issue that might be more prevalent in those Opportunity Bucks areas. So yeah, thank you for that introduction. I'd now like to introduce Stephen Robinson, Deputy CEO at Bucks Mind, who's going to talk about Buckinghamshire Mind's observations and responses in order to sort of tackle this issue. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you for inviting me along. I'll just pull up my slides. Like I said, thank you for inviting me to this webinar on loneliness and isolation. As you said, my name is Stephen Robinson. I am the Deputy CEO, Director of Services for Buckinghamshire Mind. Just to give you a quick overview of Buckinghamshire Mind, we provide a range of services across Buckinghamshire to support people with mental health concerns. These are delivered both in the communities and alongside statutory secondary mental health and GP surgery. So we operate at various different levels to engage with people with mental health concerns and issues to make sure that we are supporting people where they are engaging with services. I'll be going over some of the issues that are affecting loneliness and with people with mental health concerns that we support. So some of these slides will have some similarity to what Lucie's just talked about. So I will go on to the next one. So loneliness and mental health. I've been asked to talk about loneliness and mental health and what we're doing to tackle this, and I'll get onto our services and how we're approaching some of the areas that I'm going to be discussing in these slides. I mean, as you can say, loneliness isn't a recognised mental health problem, but having a mental health problem can increase the feelings of loneliness or social isolation. For example, many people will avoid social events and activities they usually enjoy, or have low esteem that will affect how they're going to be engaging with people. They will find it hard to try new things or worry about engaging with others, and that will have that further impact of feeling lonely and socially isolated. The feeling lonely will have a negative impact on their mental health, and it can get into a bit of a vicious cycle of feeling lonely and feeling their mental health affecting that ability to push through those barriers that might be helping them to engage with other people. They can feel like they're a burden to others, or feel overwhelmed in busy public places or work events and parties, and find it difficult to speak about how they feel due to the stigma of not being understood. Some research suggests, and as Lucie has indicated, that loneliness can increase stress. It also associated with risk of certain mental health problems, for example, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and sleep problems, which further compounds the concerns for the person. With regards to how this affects the people we support, I would suggest that our research suggests that people we support are more vulnerable to loneliness due to factors such as having no friends or family as they're estranged from their family. They could be a single parent or caring for someone else and find it hard to maintain a social life alongside dealing with their mental health concerns and issues that are affecting them. They could be belonging to a minority group within Buckinghamshire and live in areas where there aren't many people with similar backgrounds to themselves. Lucie pointed out around the health inequalities, which I'll get to in Bucks opportunity wards. Excluded from social activities because of mobility problems, don't have much money for certain social activities, have been maybe shielding because of serious risk of illness, the sort of impact of COVID and how that has continued forward for some people despite the lifting, and it's been many years since that element's been involved, but that can still affect people and make them feel more isolated and then concerned. Experience discrimination and stigma because of their mental health problems, and maybe also alongside that because of their race, gender or sexual identity. And they could have also experienced sexual or physical abuse, which may they find it harder to form closer relationships with other people, which all increases this feeling of isolation and loneliness. Research has shown, I'd like to highlight the correlation between feeling lonely and isolated and the increased risk of people taking their lives. Research has shown the correlation with this. Association between loneliness and suicidal behaviour can be determined by individual social and cultural factors. Sort of coexisting mental illness problems and maybe as well as their lifestyles that people might have alongside that around substance disorder or economic hardship play an important role for people feeling more isolated and more vulnerable to taking their lives. This increased loneliness and social isolation are associated with approximately 5-fold increase in the risk of mortality from suicide. And we can see people turn up to A&E or come into our services, our crisis intervention services, with an increased concern around suicidal ideation or thoughts of suicide. And we're seeing it across all our services in the community as well, to our befriending services, which is more volunteer-led, looking at supporting people with isolation, to obviously crisis intervention. So we've seen this increase with regards to the feelings of suicidal ideation being more prevalent in the services that we offer across the wide range of our services. Lucie touched upon health inequalities. They're a significant factor for that affect people with mental health issues, but not only, and also for those who are feeling isolated. Many people are struggling with money right now. This may have an impact on how often they see other people. This can affect their well-being and add to how lonely they feel alongside their feelings of dealing with their mental health issues on a day-to-day basis. Poor housing, living in environments that affect people's ability to be social mobile can have an impact on their perceived feeling of loneliness and social isolation. And physical health of people with serious mental illness is a real issue that can affect their health. It's an area where there's been a real push recently to make sure that people are getting physical health checks because they can die 20 years younger than normal people without serious mental health illnesses, due to the fact that the impact the lack of physical health has physical exercise has with them and their physical health. Reduced isolation across society will contribute to improving overall health and well-being and to reducing health inequalities. For example, we work across a lot of the Opportunity Bucks wards, and in Aylesbury, we have 65% of people we work with come from the Opportunity Bucks wards that we support in that area. So what are we doing to tackle loneliness? I would like to thank Heart of Bucks for the spotlight on Bucks Mind and report that have just been published. It focused on our befriending service, which is a critical service that tackles people feeling lonely in the heart of their communities. I'd also like to use this opportunity to discuss the other services that we feel are helping tackling the support and to people who are struggling with loneliness and isolation. So our peer support Bucks is peer support groups that are being delivered in the community across Buckinghamshire, in focus on High Wycombe and Aylesbury and Chesham. They allow the restructuring of social activities and groups that are run by peer volunteers and allow opportunities for people to come together in a structured way, as well as creating their own opportunities, such as friendships that they can take outside of the structured groups and organize to go and meet up with their friends to go dog walking, etc. And it's a real good way, an opportunity for people who are in the community who need to reach out and find opportunities to make connections within their communities. Closing the Gap. This is a new service that we're about to start with Sisters Advice Bucks. It's to provide mental health support for people undergoing debt advice. So really trying to get to the heart of the issue of people who are struggling with their money. Sisters Advice Bucks was finding that when people were coming to them with debt advice, that 57% of them who were indicating they had a mental health issue were dropping out of the debt advice and therefore getting themselves into more serious issues around debt collection. So we have now got a 3-year national lottery funded project that we're hoping to start to run in May this year, where we're going to be working alongside the Sisters Advice Bucks to be offering supported self-help to people who are coming into the services indicating they have mental health issues. This will provide them an opportunity to do CBT interventions to look at areas such as grief, anger management. That will also help them to think about their ways of dealing with their mental health issues, as well as addressing areas around debt that might be affecting them and making them feel more isolated and impacted by loneliness. Health inequalities. We collect data on the impact our services on loneliness. We focus on data collection within the health inequalities that we collect from the people who use our services. We use that data to really try to focus on creating opportunities and partnerships, such as the work that we're doing with Sisters Advice Bucks to think around areas about to go into Opportunity Bucks Rewards areas and other opportunities around partnerships to focus the work that we do. Our wellbeing services. So these are staff supported groups focused on people with SMI. They're much more structured approach way of supporting people who are living in the community with serious mental health illnesses, who potentially can feel more isolated due to that. And we are at the moment reaching out, reviewing our wellbeing groups into new communities, looking at, we're about to roll out a review into this year to really sort of look at how our wellbeing groups can be integrated into new communities and what would be beneficial for new communities. Counselling we offer adult and youth counselling services. These are free. We've just free counselling support for children and families, and we've just won a national lottery award to provide free adult counselling opportunities over the next year, which we're rolling out into Aylesbury Family Centre and across Buckinghamshire. Again, a real way of opening up opportunities for people to talk around issues and areas that are affecting them. Our crisis services, Safe Haven. We have 2 Safe Haven services, one in Wycombe and one in Aylesbury, that open at night from 6 to 1 o'clock. They're there in the community for anyone who's struggling and finding themselves in crisis as an alternative to going to A&E. They can be self-referred and people can call up and get support in the evening from our Wycombe or Aylesbury services. We are just about to roll out, I have started rolling out, a new safety planning service, which is working with the A&E Psychiatric Liaison Service in Stoke Mandeville. And again, this is picking up people who are turning up at the services who are indicating that they are either self-harmed or have suicidal ideation or thinking about taking their lives. And they'll be referred to the safety planning services where, upon being through the psychiatric liaison team, to pick up work with them over a 6 weeks period to address issues that might be affecting why they've turned up to A&E, indicating that they are feeling at risk of taking their lives. Again, this could be around issues around health inequalities. It could be around finance. It could be around feeling lonely on impact, isolation, that impact on them. And therefore, the 6-week plan from the safety planning will help to address those areas and reduce the return for that person and support that will increase that support in the community for that person. Our training services, which are funded by Public Health, do a lot of bespoke mental health first aid training and suicide first aid training across the county. that is addresses and upskills people and organisations to provide its support for their teams and for people in the communities or in VCSE services to be really thinking about better mental health first aid and suicide support for services that will be going into and supporting communities that will be feeling this impact. And just to go back to the befriending services, this is a volunteer-led services that matches people up for a 6-month period of support. That's a one-to-one support that really goes into the communities where people are feeling isolated and don't want to necessarily come out of their home to go into groups. So it's a real first step into doing one-to-one personalised services with people to support them to think about how they can take that step out to maybe going to groups such as peer support bucks or wellbeing services. So it really is focused around tackling isolation and working with individuals to really support that. And a lot of people who use the service see the service as that, as a service that helps tackle isolation and really is reaching into them to support them to reach out into their communities. So thank you for letting me present. These are our contact details for referring into our services, referring to our Bucks Mind website if you're looking for any support or opportunities to engage with our services, that and some of the services I mentioned, our training services. I mentioned about our wellbeing review that we're about to hold this year. So the QR code is takes you to a form that if people want to participate and want to be involved in the wellbeing review going into this year, that will allow them to show their interest. Thank you again.
Brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. And yeah, I was struck there by the sort of some of the severity and the seriousness of some of the issue and the impact that it can have. You talked about the links to suicide and thoughts of suicide and so on. So I think this is clearly a very serious issue that we need to be looking at and working together on as a society. I thought great there to see a range of the different types of interventions that an organisation like Bucks Mind can provide, and great to see examples of where I think the charity sector in particular can provide interventions to support in some of these more complex social problems. So thank you very much. And now finally, I'd like to introduce Melissa Humphrey from the Hilltop Community Centre and Wycombe Multicultural Organisation, who I think is going to give us a bit more of a focused look at a particular project, which is the Movers and Shakers project in High Wycombe. So Melissa, welcome, and over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me today to your webcast on loneliness and isolation. So thank you very much. As introduced by Henry, my name is Melissa Humphrey and I work for an organisation called Wycombe Multicultural Organisation, and we run a programme called Movers and Shakers, which Lucie touched on, which is a health and wellbeing programme designed for people of age 65 plus. And we operate from High Wycombe. So I'll just go through to our next slide. Okay, I'll just give you a brief overview of our charity because you might not have heard of us. We were established in 1991. Wycombe Multicultural Organisation is a community charity representing the interests of approximately 8,000 people, predominantly from the African and Caribbean heritage in High Wycombe and surrounding areas. As a community organisation and a facility provider, we offer several activities and services at our base, which is Hilltop Community Centre, which benefit the community. So what we do as a charity, we provide a community facility, which is Hilltop Community Centre, based in Cressex, which is actually within the Buckinghamshire Opportunities Ward. We also provide youth support, which is Saturday school and targeted educational programs, senior citizen support, which is the Movers and Shakers sort of health and wellbeing program that I'll get onto shortly, and we carry out sort of welfare checks on the vulnerable and isolated members that we have within our organisation. We also provide help with sort of welfare services. So, for example, things like health awareness days, and are sort of a channel to communicate information to our community via sort of our connections that we have, such as things on prostate cancer, for example, because often organisations find certain groups harder to reach. So we have good connections with lots of sort of health services out there and things like that. We also run sort of social and leisure activities, such as comedy shows, bingo nights, things to bring the community together. Obviously, aim to sort of help community cohesion and obviously reduce isolation by having things and different activities for people to go to. So, okay, so our project is Movers and Shakers, and the aim of the project is to improve the health, well-being and social connections of older people who are predominantly of African Caribbean heritage from the High Wycombe area. And we operate within the Opportunity Bucks ward, like I mentioned, which is in Cressex, Wycombe Cressex. We work predominantly with elders over 70 and offer a weekly programme of activities and support over 3 hours that covers 3 main elements. And number one, sort of healthy living, which includes a simple yet nutritious meal and opportunities to hear from groups such as the NHS and other health groups on key topics such as dementia, living with diabetes, high blood pressure, and other topics of relevance to older people. They also take part in light exercise tailored to those who are chair-based or using walking aids to obviously improve their health through physical activities. Well-being, which is talks, advice, activities to improve their well-being and to cope with the effects of things such as the cost of living crisis. This includes sort of welfare and benefits guidance, including pensions credits, attendance allowance, and signposting them to services that can help with these specialist services. And things to help, increase their income and obviously cover essential household and food bills and things like that. And then number 3, social inclusion. It's a safe and welcoming space for fun activities and games, which includes arts, crafts, board games, and more stimulating activities and things like that. So it's an opportunity for them to socialise over a freshly prepared lunch, and which obviously helps reduce their isolation and loneliness that they might be feeling. As you may know, High Wycombe is obviously an area that has the best, wouldn't say the best transport link. So we do provide transportation via a minibus with a driver for the most vulnerable participants with limited mobility, as without providing the transport, many of them may not be able to actually attend the service due to lack of transport links, and obviously the fact that it's not the easiest with hills and things like that. Obviously, if you're over a certain age, it can be quite challenging to obviously get around in certain areas, depending on where they live. So how we combat loneliness. So our programme is designed to obviously combat loneliness and isolation, and we provide a structured space for older adults to connect with peers, share their experiences, receive emotional support, engage in shared activities, and foster a sense of belonging, thus mitigating feelings of isolation and loneliness that accompany in ageing. And key ways we achieve this is through the social interaction. Obviously, we meet weekly on a Friday for 3 hours and offer opportunities to talk, listen, and participate in activities with others facing similar challenges and creating a sense of community. They also partake in lunch, which is obviously the perfect opportunity to socialise with their peers over a meal. Shared experiences. As many of the participants are from a similar cultural background, they can relate to each other in terms of their stories and challenges, often validating and understanding. For example, we've celebrated things like Windrush Day, and with many of the group being from the same generation, they enjoy telling stories of their experiences of when they first arrived in the UK and things like that. Just to make it clear, the group is all inclusive. We have people from all backgrounds. Originally, the group was set up for the African and Caribbean community, but everybody's welcome, and we do have a mix of different cultures that actually enjoy coming, which is lovely to see. So we also provide emotional support as part of the programme, is with the organised talks from health professionals such as the NHS. We work very closely with public health, and they provide a lot of our guest speakers on subjects such as diabetes, dementia, and different ailments and things that are common within older people, as well as work with trading standards. We've worked with Age UK, and they come in and do various talks to the group, so that they can obviously get a sense of what services are out there that can help them in their day-to-day lives. And these sessions provide a safe space to express feelings and concerns, and so they feel encouraged and empathetic towards each other. The group size has grown over the years to roughly about 40 participants on the register we have, and we see them forming friendships as they meet each week, and it helps with the feelings of loneliness and obviously feeling more connected, because obviously by running a programme over a number of years, we've been doing it since 2022 was when we first piloted the scheme, and we've run it every year since. We do break over the colder winter months, and that's just simply because it's very, very difficult to get the attendance up when it's when the weather is quite a challenge. So we do try. Over the years, they obviously have formed relationships, and we see new faces coming in as well, as word spreads and things like that. So the advocacy and information sharing. So the talks and presentations are a key aspect of the programme, as it provides information about health topics many of them are facing, and having the opportunity to listen and answer questions to the health professionals is valued and welcome. We also provide information on local services and support services relevant to older adults, such as Buck's talking therapies. They came and did a presentation for the group as well. So we do try and reach out to a lot of the local organisations to come and obviously provide a good insight to what services they provide, and helping them get a sense of what services are out there for them. So, okay, so I would say our key challenges. So the elderly population obviously are facing many challenges, including health issues, social isolation, and financial insecurity. obviously the health issues that we see is obviously chronic conditions such as heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, diabetes are all very, very common within the group. As the group ages, with many between 80 and 90 years old, we do see deterioration in some of the participants' health. Some, due to ill health, are no longer able to attend the sessions, which obviously would cause further isolation and loneliness. But to help combat this, we do have within our organisation, we have a social welfare team who make phone calls to check on the well-being of our participants and other older members during periods of ill health and when we haven't seen them in a while. Just a regular sort of phone call to check in and see if there is anything we can do to help. And also keeping in contact with family members as well is quite a key point as well. Another challenge, obviously, the physical limitations. We do notice a decline in physical capacity of some due to health issues such as stroke and arthritis, and also their brain health. There are a few members in the group who are showing early signs of dementia, which is a common brain health issue that affect the elderly. So we do take part in sort of games and activities to help stimulate their memories and things like that. Obviously, the key challenge, as we've heard all morning now, is obviously the social isolation, loss of contacts with friends and relatives due to ill health or bereavement leads to loneliness. Many of our participants, their spouses have passed away or they live alone, so loneliness is very, very prevalent for them. As I think I touched on before, High Wycombe bus availability is quite limited, and travelling across town can be very challenging with those with limited mobility. And the isolation experience during COVID-19 pandemic is still mentioned amongst the group, as they remember how lonely they felt during the lockdown period. And even after all this, years, it's still discussed and brought up amongst the group, as it was a very challenging time for them. We also, obviously, the other aspect is financial insecurity. With the rise of cost of living, is forcing those on a pension to spend their income on essential things like food, bills and housing, meaning there's limited money to cover transport or leisure activities. So for our programme, we are very, very grateful to Heart of Bucks, because over the last 2 years, they have supported our Movers and Shakers project by providing funding, which covers a large portion of the cost of running the actual activity, which has meant that the participants would only make a very small contribution to the actual event each week. So without the funding for us, it would be very, very difficult to keep the costs as low as we do, just so that more people can attend. So we're very, very grateful to Heart of Bucks for their support with that. So yeah, in terms of my presentation, that is all I'd like to say, and I would just like to thank you all for inviting me here today, and hope that was clear and everything was covered. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Melissa. That was really, really interesting and lovely to see a real sort of live example of some of this work that's being carried out in the county. In particular, I think it was striking that loneliness really comes across as something that can be addressed in person and at a local level in a relatively small area. It's perhaps not one of these issues that can be tackled from this very sort of national top-down approach. It's nice to have a national strategy perhaps, but really where that impact is going to be made is in that very sort of hyper-local way that where you're working in. I thought it was really interesting, some of the barriers, the transport and getting everyone together in a physical space is actually not as easy, even when you're organising it in a well-run charity. That's still a challenge that people have, and I think it's great that you've managed to sort of work your way through that and get a sort of sustainable project going for so long. So thank you. We're now just going to move into a quick Q&A, if that's okay, for our speakers. And I'd like to come to Lucie first, if you don't mind. And you mentioned in your presentation about making every contact count, and I wondered if maybe that's something that for the audience you could just elaborate a little bit on, like what is that? What does it mean? How does it work in Buckinghamshire?
Yep, so Making Every Contact Count training is a training program that we offer free from the council. So I can give you the web links, but if you Google Buckinghamshire Making Every Contact Count, you'll find the web link to book onto some training. And we offer that to a whole variety of different professionals who are coming into contact with residents. And what Making Every Contact Count does is it gives us the skills to have what we call a strength-based conversation. So all too often we might jump to the solution for somebody, but as we've seen in the context of isolation, sometimes those solutions can be really quite complex, and they will be very different for different people. And so the training from Making Every Contact Count gives us the skills and the confidence to be able to have that conversation with an individual to really identify what's happening in your lives, what would help you to address that situation, and then working with that individual to develop a bit of a goal or an action plan for them to work towards to help achieve it. So that sounds quite a lot, but in reality, these can be really quite short and succinct conversations. We're not talking about kind of the levels of coaching or counselling. These are short, everyday conversations that we have, but asking a slightly different question to support somebody to maybe motivate them to go and look on their community Facebook page and find an activity that they might want to go to, or to perhaps talk to a neighbour to see if they would like to car share to go to an activity together. Again, the solution is going to look different for everybody, for every individual, but the Making Every Contact Count training provides us with those skills and the confidence to have those conversations on a daily basis, whether that's in a formal workplace setting or whether that's in a kind of informal, opportunistic, talking to somebody in a supermarket and you're just having a conversation with them there.
That's great. Thanks, Lucie. Really appreciate the clarification on that. It sounds really interesting. Hopefully something that local charities can have a look at there. Stephen, I wonder if I could come to you next with a question. We think COVID was mentioned a couple of times in various presentations, and I wondered whether demand for your services at Bucks Mind has changed, particularly since that period of COVID, where I think mental health and loneliness, isolation, lots of these issues really came to the fore. Have you noticed a spike or a difference?
Certainly. I mean, I'll have to talk a bit from what people have told me, because I joined Bucks Mind probably about 3 years ago, so slightly after we came out of COVID. But I understand that during COVID, obviously, we moved our services, as everyone did, to being more online. We saw a significant increase in the provision of service that we were offering over that period, due to the recognised impact it was having on people being stuck in their homes, not being able to come out and come into groups and be more social. So we have definitely seen an increase in our service provision that has carried forward from COVID, and the ability to provide a much wider scope of range in the community to access people and support people in their communities. We have peer support in schools, again funded by Public Health, thank you, which has been working alongside MHT schools and going into schools, creating these peers to support people in schools. And again, we see a lot of that isolation concerns about coming back into the schools from younger adults who are supporting each other in those settings. And that's a definite sort of impact that you're still seeing coming into schools. What I would say, interesting enough, is in our counselling services, in our youth counselling particularly, that has started in about the last year and a half, where we thought we were going to be more online due to, in some ways, a sort of maybe a bit of a stereotype that you have younger children who sort of more social media want to be doing online. We're actually seeing a lot more people wanting to do face-to-face, and we're seeing that in adult counselling as well. So there really is a sort of element of where support is a bit more, I wouldn't say, I think all support that we offer is personalised, but obviously counselling has that element of going to someone to really talk about areas that are affecting you. We're seeing a lot more of a push of wanting to do that more face-to-face, coming into our offices, going into family centres in Aylesbury, people travelling down from Buckingham to come to our service in Wycombe and Aylesbury to actually do those face-to-face sessions. So yeah, I think what we're seeing is a recognition that I think COVID at the time clearly pushed people into the aspects of going online, digital, more digital, and that provided a much wider scope of reach across the county, which is fantastic. But actually, as we go forward, I think that sense of being in a room with someone, actually talking to someone and having that social contact is really coming back, and really a sort of a key factor for a lot of people seeking support.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I can only imagine the sort of challenges that your services and charities like yours experienced during COVID, with that sort of spike in the sort of mental health challenges that everyone faced by such an uncertain time. Thank you. Melissa, I wonder if I could come to you now, if that's okay, and just ask you, probably lots of small charities watching this might be thinking about setting up a similar project or running a similar thing. Is there any advice that you might like to give them, and in terms of the challenges that you experienced, what the good, the bad, how it's all worked for you in terms of running the organisation, and the project specifically? Is there any advice you might have for similar charities in Bucks thinking about doing something similar?
Something similar. I suppose, it's a very, very good question in terms of, I do know there are other movers and shakers groups. Obviously, I know Lucie mentioned movers and shakers, so the name is out there. So, and I believe everyone obviously does their own different format, but it's hopefully quite well known within the communities that Movers and Shakers is sort of designed for older people to actually sort of engage in activities to sort of get them out of the house, basically. I suppose in terms, our main challenge, I suppose, is, which I guess there's not much you can do in the sense, obviously the churn is also, can be very difficult for, for the group, as in naturally, because people are obviously getting older, we do have periods of churn, or people who do, obviously pass on, and or their health deteriorates and things like that. So it's kind of, it's obviously it is a part of life, but we do try to focus a lot on celebration and make each session's a sort of fun experience for them, so that at least as sad as some of these times can be, we try and make it the best that that they could enjoy, if you like. And I think in terms of what we do, we provide sort of lunch and things like that for them. And I guess again with this is more to do with the providing a lunch service, obviously that can come with its challenges because you've got obviously different dietary requirements and things like that. So I guess I would say that in itself can be a challenge. So, but some groups may not partake in lunch. So it might well be that if you're looking to start a similar group, you may just maybe have an activity and then the exercise part and leave the lunch out, just because sometimes that can cause that's the busiest point in the program, I must admit, and quite challenging because obviously everyone's got special dietary requirements. But I do know of groups who have taken the lunch part out of the program just because the first 2 hours is enough to manage. So that's probably one of the things I would obviously mention. You can obviously be quite flexible. And what is nice is that because there are other groups who do a similar thing, as in sort of movers and shakers, or they may call it a different name, it's nice to kind of network amongst each other as well. And we would invite anyone if they wanted to come down to see what we do. We haven't restarted yet, but we'll start in a couple of weeks. Just to see what the format's like and things like that. So yeah, it's a great program, and I know that it's quite well received amongst our community. So but yeah, so hopefully that is quite useful to help with.
Lovely. Thank you, Melissa. So I think that is it for our hour. So I wanted to just take the opportunity to say a huge thank you to Lucie, Stephen, and Melissa for contributing their time and effort and energy, both today and here in our webcast, but also in their daily jobs and what they're doing for Buckinghamshire, particularly to deal with this problem. I'd also just encourage anyone watching to have a look at our Buckinghamshire Uncovered report on loneliness and isolation, which we've just published on our website, which has a bit of a deep dive into the issue, both nationally and locally, and looks at some other projects that the charity sector are participating in the county. So yes, thank you. It was lovely to see you all. Really appreciate your time, and all the best.